Hi guys, it's Kobe here. Welcome to Pixel Affair, and in today's video we are going to talk about the Geometry Axis capsule, which I spoke about in this video about C4D R25, what's new and my thoughts. But in today's video we will see how we will use the Geometry Axis capsule to make a rolling cube, which I've actually done a video how to do same dynamically, just with dynamics as well. But you are going to use the Geometry Axis capsule to do a simple one, right? So the geometry axis capsule makes you change the axis of your object parametrically, or I'll say non-destructively. So I'll create a cube, and you can see if we rotate it, it rotates from the center of the cube, right? Let's come into our assets browser, and I'll look for geometry node. We can type in geometry, and you can see it's bringing everything geometry, or we can simply go to nodes, and let's actually clear the geometry and come to geometry modifiers. You can see we have all the geometry. Let me change the view to list so that in here we will see we have a geometry axis capsule. So I can simply drag and drop it and make it a child of the cube. And let's hide our asset. And you can see down here we have this freeze transformation down here. So if I actually increase the axis of the Y to 100%, you can see now the axis of our cube changes. So if I take the cube and rotate, you can see now rotating from the bottom of our object. So that's basically, I can actually select the geometry again, set this one to 0, and now you can change it to other objects. So it depends on what you type in here. You can actually type in, let's say 70, and that's where the axis of your object will be, right? So basically that's what the geometry axis does. But something I discovered in my exploration in C4D is that when I make the geometry axis and the cube a child of a fracture object, so I come to my mode graph menu and I choose the fracture, and I make the cube and the geometry axis a child of the fracture, right? And I select the geometry axis, come to the input. Let me move it 100% on the Y axis, right? Now if I select, actually go to the fracture, and I'll change the object, the mode from straight to explode, segment, and connect, right? Now if I select the cube and come to its coordinates and rotate it, you can see it always stays at the top of our grid, so it never like get into. Let me actually take this, disable the geometry axis, and you can see where it's rotating from. But when I enable it, it always stays on top, right? So this is something I discovered accidentally in when I was playing around, right? So it means you could simply use it to do a cube rotations, because no matter what you do, it always rotate on the axis, like on top, and you stay on top of your grid or your floor. So that means you rotate it, and now you set a keyframe for your position as well. But what if you can actually control the rotation with the movement of your object, or otherwise control the movement of your object with the rotation? So what you simply do is that, so anytime you move the cube, select the move it, you want it to also rotate whilst it's moving, right? And you are going to, because you want to move it on the Z, we will use the Z axis. So I'll right click on the Z, right click, and come to expression, set driver, right? And now what we want it to control. This is the position we want it to control, right? So we right click and say, okay, right click this one, expression, set it to set driven absolutely. So now if I select my cube and move it, you can see it's rotating the cube, but it doesn't like follow accordingly. So what you do is that, because you know the size of the cube, which is 200 centimeters by 200 centimeters, anytime you move 200 centimeters, you want it to rotate 90 degrees, because that's typically how it will be if we're rotating it from this axis, right? So now let's double click on the espresso. It's giving us this espresso tag, and if you select the espresso tag, let me make it big so that we see what's happening. You can see the cube position is piped into a range mapper node, right? And it's piping back into the cube, into the rotation. So what we will do is that in the range mapper node, when you select the range mapper, you can see the input upper is set to 0. So when the cube is at 0 centimeters, the rotation will be 0 centimeters. When it's 100, then the rotation, that is the output lower, will be 360 degrees, right? So that's not what we want. We want when the cube is 0, fine, the output should be 0. But then when it's 200, which is the size of the cube, which we know 200 centimeters, the rotation should be 90. That is, when we move the cube 200 centimeters, it should rotate 90 degrees here, right? So let's select the range mapper and now set this one to 90. Now if we move our cube, you can see now it makes sense, but still it's rotating backwards. So what you can do is select the range mapper node again, and instead of 90 you set it to -90. Or we could have simply come into this node tab and set it to reverse, and it will do the same, right? But I'll use it the -90. And now if I come in here and now move my cube, you can see when I move it, now it's following the rotation the way we want it. So this is very, very simple, right? But the disadvantage with this is that anytime I change the size of my cube to say 50 by 50 by 50, right, it means I have to come in here again, range mapper node, and make sure that this one is set to 50, right, before it moves. It makes sense. So that means that we can simply just pipe the size of our cube straight into the range mapper node in here. This is the input upper, so that anytime we change it, it also changes this one as well, right? So what we do is we come into our espresso. Let me make it big, and in the cube we go to click on this red, come to the object properties, and you can see down here we have size. So I'll choose the size of the object, and I want it to connect to the input upper, which is this one of the range mapper node. So I'll just go ahead and click and drag it on the blue. It will bring us all the objects that we can connect to, and what we want to connect to is the input upper. So when you connect it, you can see now anytime I change the size of my cube, let me actually scale it, I make it big, automatically I don't need to come in and change anything again. I can simply use the move tool and I'll move it, and it will follow it accordingly, right? So that's how you simply do a simple cube rotation using this trick. So let's see if you want to also connect it to the X position. So like anytime we move it on the X, it's simple as we come into the object coordinate, where actually, yeah, so object coordinates and position, we choose position X, and we want it to rotate the cube on the banking, right? So this is where we want to control. So we will, we can simply, let me undo and come into, instead of piping it straight, we need another range mapper. So all we'll do is we'll select this range mapper, hold control and click and drag to create another copy, and I'll pipe this one, the X, into the input, right, and the size again because we want the same size. And now let's pipe into the rotation, which is the B. So I come to object, I come to the coordinates, and I'll choose rotation. You see we have global rotation, but we choose the normal rotation there and add pipe into the B, rotation B. So now let's select this one. When we move it, you can see it's also moving, but it's moving backwards. So then we have to make sure this one is set to 90. And now if we go into our object and move it, you can see now it also rotates perfectly. So now that's how we will do something like a cube rotation. So after we are done, all we can do is that, let me close this. You can simply take this, move it out, and now you can see we have different objects rotating. I can take this one and this one doing something else. You can duplicate the two, bring this one here, and I'll move it somewhere here. And you can go ahead and have several like of it. And another good thing is that you can affect it to the demograph effector. So I can come to random effectors, random, and now you can see our random effector is affecting because it's in the fracture object. So this is something I actually stumbled upon playing around in Cinema 4D, and it's quite simple. But recently I saw this video on Maxon's Ask the Trainer, and it was talking about similar thing. And in here he actually showed how you can actually do it using align to spline, so that you can actually make it roll along a spline. And he also showed how you can use the same the C4D C notes. I mean, basically using notes to do it the same thing. And this one go a bit in depth using notes and stuff like that. So if you want to know how to do it, this is a little bit in depth and a bit technical. So that one today is a video from Maxon's Ask the Trainer channel, which you can actually watch to know how to do it using spline and stuff like that.